Hey everybody, welcome back. What I'm going to do right now is go over some safety things you want to consider whenever you're working with a chainsaw, maybe working in some brush or working with trees, cutting trees. But primarily what I'm going to show you right now is the stuff that you're going to be used for safety, but also the reason why you want to use it. Um, it's very important. A lot of people think that they can just pick it up like it's a kitchen knife or a butter knife and use it, and nothing's going to happen. And that's when accidents happen. When we get really comfortable and we think nothing's going to happen, that's when it happens. And so with this right here, you're talking about a power tool that can hurt you, even kill you really, really quickly. And a lot of times we don't know what's going to happen until we actually use the piece of equipment, and then a force in the tree or the brush or whatever you're cutting happens differently than what we anticipate. So I'll show you that. That'll also be in this video as far as how you're actually going to be cutting and then what you need to consider when you're cutting. But right now, let's just talk about the equipment. Right here, we've got a helmet that has suspension on the inside of the helmet, and that's actually engineered to absorb shock. Whenever something hits your head, it takes and disperses the force through the suspension and through the helmet itself. The helmet's actually got some dust protection on it. It doesn't take fine particles out. That's what safety glasses are for. I'll be wearing safety glasses also. It does have hearing protection on it, which you should use unless you don't care about your hearing. This is your helmet. We've got our chaps. These are for stopping a chainsaw chain from cutting into your body. Okay, they are going to get damaged. These have been damaged. A couple of months ago I was cutting and I actually had the saw kicked back on a lower tree that I was cutting, and it came in and it cut right here. It did its job. Nothing happened to my boot, which was covering my leg, my pants that were being covered by my boot, and my skin underneath it. This is engineered to grab the point that's on your cutting tooth on your chain, and that is also very important as far as a sharp chain. A sharp chain is also for safety. But back to the pants, these pants, they're a very high denier nylon, and they've got another fiber in them that is cut resistant. There's a material inside of it that's engineered to grab onto the tooth and cause it to not move. So that's the reason why these pants are designed the way they are. They're engineered to stop a chain from rolling. It's very important. If you believe you can get along without these, that's on you. They're well worth the money. You can get these things as low as 40 bucks for a pair, or you can get them up to $300-400. They make them into full-size jeans that you put on just like a pair of pants. These are considered full wrap chaps. The only place it's not covered is your buttocks area. Otherwise, everything else is covered on them. They're very durable. These were about 100 bucks. They're a Husqvarna technical pant. So that's your chaps. I do wear leather gloves when I'm cutting most of the time, and the reason why is sometimes your chain will get hung up on some brush or something down here on the bottom, and you might turn your saw off and just rotate it like this or like this to free it up. Back on the saw, why it's important to keep your saw chain sharp is not only for cutting well, but also the point. I know you can't see it well, but on the cutting corner of the tooth, there is supposed to be a point there, and that point is there to let it get into the wood and cut, but it's also there to help protect you in either a pair of pants or a pair of safety chaps. So it's very important to have a sharp saw chain for that reason also. You'll want some wedges of various sizes. These are for like limbs. This is for various different size cuts into a tree that you might make, either in rounding out or bucking, or if you're felling a tree, you'll use these to help direct the fall of the tree that you're actually cutting. And they make these in various lengths. This is a 6-inch. Obviously, this is around a 2 or 3 inch. But that's important to have to keep the tree going the right direction. But also, you can use them whenever a tree is laid down horizontally. You can place these into your upper cut, your top cut, and as you cut through, rather than the tree, whenever it goes to fall, it might fall like this and pinch your bar of your chainsaw. And so if you put a felling wedge in, that'll keep it separated and it won't drop. So those are handy for that. If you didn't know that, try it sometime. You'll see that it will help you to keep your bar from getting hung up, and you won't have to bring your second chainsaw out to free your first chainsaw. It's important to keep a first aid kit around. If you're working by yourself, or even if you do have help, if you do cut yourself with a chainsaw, or if you have another small injury or something, it's important to have something to, one, help you continue to stay healthy and safe, but also in case you do get injured. Probably the worst injury you'd have in cutting trees is a tree fall on you. And second to that is probably cutting yourself with your chainsaw, and you can imagine that would be very bad. I've never done it. I've seen it. I've had people, be cutting trees and come to me, and we have to pack that thing full of gauze or towel or whatever we have, and take this person straight to the hospital. There's pretty severe injuries that can happen with a chainsaw or with a tree falling on you. You want to have an axe, a good sharp axe with a decent size handle on it. It makes the labor that you use when swinging an axe less. If it's got a longer handle on it, you have better leverage. The axe is handy for that reason. It's also handy for just cutting roots into the ground. That way you don't have to stick your bar into the ground to cut a root. You can use your axe to cut a root. It'll help free up the tree you might be taking down or whatever. Also, you want to make sure you have your bar oil and enough fuel for however much you're going to be cutting. So those are just some of the basic things you need to have with you. I also have a tool bag that I carry with me that has all the tools that I need to disassemble a saw and clean the saw. Also the tools that I need to help repair the saw too. So those are just the things that I carry around all the time whenever I'm using my saw. And I find that it's very helpful, and it helps you to keep going when you want to have just one outing with getting a job done with cutting trees or timber or whatever. But I'm going to get my safety gear on. I'll set up the camera to some of this brush that we're going to cut up. We're clearing off a small area to plant on. We've got a lot of brush from trees that I laid over in this area. I've got to cut it out of the way. That way I can use some machinery to finish moving it out of the way because it's full-length trees. So I'm going to get my gear on and reset the camera up, and then we'll go from there. Okay, everybody, as you can see, all of this is just a big mess. And so what I'm going to be doing here is I need to consolidate this into smaller pieces. That way it's a little bit easier to move with the skid steer or the tractor. And so I've got to cut this strategically. It's kind of like playing checkers. Whenever you're playing checkers, you don't want to be too aggressive and then work yourself into a hole by losing a bunch of pieces. And so as you go through here, you have to strategically cut. That way you can continue to move forward and make progress as you go, rather than creating a mess in the beginning, and you have to clean that up as you cut it. And so what we want to do is start from here and work our way forward and let everything fall to the point where we can continue to move forward and not have to go back and fix this to move forward 2 steps when you move 3 steps backwards. And so we'll start with where I'm standing at right here. The biggest thing with chainsaws is what can happen is you neglect to think about the things that are by your feet. And what I'm talking about is stuff like this right here. It's down on the ground, But when you get the chainsaw going, it's loud and you're not going to hear things crunching, and you may not feel something hung up underneath your feet. You go to move and you've got this chainsaw going, and then you end up falling on the saw. And so, to keep that in mind as you go, you want the area beneath you to be nice and clear. So we're going to start out by trimming some of this up, and then as we go, because this is right at eye level, even though I've got eye protection on and then I've got a screen and a helmet, this stuff can still fall on you or poke you in the eye or the ear, the mouth, or whatever. And so I'm going to get the saw started up, and so it'll kind of give you an idea how I do things. People do things differently, but this is how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to get the saw started up, and it'll be to the point where I want to start right here and be able to move forward and just make the space a little bit more open. And so this isn't going to be showing you exactly how to do it. It's just going to give you a general idea of what you need to consider whenever you're doing something like this. You want to be safe first and foremost, but you want to be effective too. And to do both of those things, you've got to pay attention to everything from the point where you start moving to the point where you can celebrate and say, I did good and I've got the job done. So let's get started. Well, that about wraps this video up. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea what you're looking at whenever you have to come into a mess and clean up just a big pile of limbs and brush and bush or whatever it is. This was a combination of a bunch of pine trees that I'd cut down, some real small hardwoods in an area that we're clearing off to plant some corn at. But you have to consider your safety and what's going to happen whenever you're cutting anything, moving anything. It doesn't matter. But with trees, you know, a limb can look like it's going to fall a certain direction, and then you go to cut it and it pops back a different direction, and it could hurt you, it could kill you or whatever. But this kind of gives you an idea. I just kind of cut a path through here, and that gives me about an 8-foot section that I can move with a machine. And I've got to continue to do that through a couple more sections of it. But that's about the process that one would go through. This is the process that I would go through. And it's not necessarily starting completely from the top and going to the bottom. You know, if something's putting pressure on it from the bottom, if you go to cut on the top, the pressure from the bottom is going to interfere with your top cut. So you have to consider that, and that's the reason why you might have seen me cut something on the bottom before I cut the top, or vice versa. You have to consider the force that's being pressed on whatever you're cutting against, and you have to do that all the time. Even if you're cutting a tree that's straight up and down, or a tree that's has a lean to it, you have to consider that. And there are things you can do, whether it be using a tension line or 2 or 3 tension lines or whatever. You know, if you have a tree that's leaning on that tree, that can interfere with it also. But that just kind of gives you an idea. And whenever you're cutting, take all the time that you need. You know, there can be emergencies where you just have to take a risk and make a quick decision. But if you don't have to do that, take all the time you need, and just be as safe as possible. Cutting trees when necessary can be very fulfilling. Sometimes you have to cut a tree because it's diseased or dying, but trees are something that we need. They're a very good renewable natural resource. They're necessary to help clean up the environment, clean up the air. They help to keep your ecosystem stable. And without trees, you know, it makes life difficult. We're going to be turning around and planting. So we're going to be providing with the area that these trees are giving up. And it's not just going to make us happy, it's going to make other people happy, it's going to put food in their bellies. So that's our reason for doing this. Otherwise, we don't just cut trees to cut them. Do what you can to help promote your ecosystem, and when you have to do things like this, you just have to do it. But when you do have to do this, be safe. Learn from people that know something about it. Don't ever do something with a tool or a machine or a car, it doesn't matter. Don't ever do something with something like that if you don't know how to do it. Learn from somebody else. Pick up a book, search the internet, watch this YouTube channel. We're going to teach you a lot here, and like always, if you like what we do, please show us, talk about it, share it with other people. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll be coming up with something different, I'm sure, somewhere near down the road. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.